Welcome back to another episode of Driven by Cause. This episode is brought to you by Ariba, the thought leaders behind the industry's only completely integrated and fully automated all-in-one digital fundraising, donor relationship management database, healthcare hospitality, and auction software. And this is all within one unified database. I'm joined by my awesome guest and co-host, Jay Fisk. How are you doing today, Jay?
I am doing great, David. How are you today? Looking
Well,
forward to another
Jay,
great episode.
yeah, no, absolutely, Jay. And you're right. Today's going to be a great episode because we have a very special guest, and I am thrilled to welcome Peter Corse. Peter is the founder of Peter Gross Consulting, where he helps nonprofit organizations strengthen operations and advance their missions through smarter technology strategy and implementation. With more than 30 years of experience in the nonprofit technology consulting, Peter specializes in system selection, change management, technology leadership, and helping organizations align technology with long term growth and impact. Thank you for being here, Peter, because you do speak my language. I will tell you that right now.
I'm thrilled to be here with both of you, David and Jay.
Well, we're also happy you could be here with us today. We really appreciate it. Peter, let's get started. And, could you share with our listeners some information about yourself and how you got started in the nonprofit industry?
Absolutely. So I am Peter Gross. I am based in Nashville, Tennessee. It's the fifth or sixth stop in my various cities across the country. I've been working for or consulting with nonprofit organizations for about 36 years, which makes me older than I prefer to be thought about as. I started out my career actually working in nonprofits. A lot of the work that I did was doing fundraising, program management, event management, on and on and on and on. I worked for my first foray into the nonprofit world was for a civil rights organization called Focus Hope in Detroit. It was an incredible introduction to the power of the civic sector. Also worked for a place called the Aspen Institute, which is a leadership development think tank kind of a place. I went as a consultant and worked with dozens of clients. I managed a group of consultants between at one point 12 and at one point 90, and had a great experience there. Just got to work with all kinds of different organizations, and then essentially went independent in 2007. I With partners, I built a consulting practice over about 13 years that grew to have 4 partners, about 11 or 12 employees, and then decided to make a change in 2020 where I was going to go back to being independent. And my first day of being independent was March 1st of 2020. And you can remember what happened however many days later.
Oh yeah, we remember.
It was perhaps the worst timing in the history of job changes. But that's what I've been doing since 2020. The common thread, I think, is that I serve primarily as an advisor to nonprofit organizations. So, I am not the person that if someone chose Exceed Further, that I would be the one that would implement it. But I would serve as a resource and an advisor to nonprofit organizations to help them to serve as a translator between the two sides, because nonprofits can often struggle because they don't do technology projects every day. And so I serve as that bridge between vendors and clients often, or a translator, if you will.
All right, well, Peter, let's get into it a little bit. You said the real issue often isn't the system, it's the leadership buy-in. And so why do you think leadership is still the biggest barrier? And what does strong technology leadership actually look like inside of a nonprofit?
Yeah. So in that context, when I talk about leadership, it's not only about the technology leadership, right? The CIO or the director of IT or whatever that might be. But what I find a lot of times is that folks in the executive suite, CEO, et cetera, they have this admirable instinct, which is, I'm not a techie person, so I really shouldn't get involved in this project. And I get that. That's being humble about what you know and what you don't know. The trouble is as you guys know as well as I do, these are business projects. And the success of any of these systems depends not only on good technology decisions, good technology investments, but it requires that the technology is aligned with the business of the organization.
Yeah.
And I'll probably talk about that a little bit more later, but in some ways, that's the biggest barrier is the hands-off nature I think that leadership can often take. In terms of what strong technology leadership looks like inside nonprofits, a few things. One is adoption flows downhill. The higher in the organization that a leader is and is using the system, whether that means actually entering data or just consuming reports that come out of the system, the better off the adoption overall is going to be. The second piece of it is that information technology is a strategic asset, not a utility. It used to be that nonprofits had all kinds of purely technical folks that had to handle servers and had to handle networking and bandwidth and all of those kinds of things. All of those things have become utilities at this point. But that's not true for the business that you guys are in. The management and the usage of information is a strategic asset. And the projects themselves require representation at the leadership level, as well as clear communication from the leadership level that they communicate their needs from a business perspective so that they can be translated into the most effective way of implementing a system.
Mm.
The last thing I would add is that, and I think it's related to this, is that the governance of technology is not the job of the technology department alone. Every department should have a seat at the table of the overall technology governance that's happening at the organization.
Yeah. Peter, thank you for all of that. And I hope our listeners are listening because it really is important on what you said. I mean, we definitely live on the other side of that as, Ariva and a software perspective that is selling software. And I know we solved the problem with disparate systems. And I think you bring up good points because a lot of nonprofits invest significant time and resources into selecting new technology, but many still end up with the systems with maybe a different name that are still underutilized, disconnected, or difficult for teams to adapt. Given your experience when organizations are evaluating new systems, what are the most common mistakes you see them make?
Sure. I think right off the bat, and it's a little bit of two sides of the same coin. Often people will come to the table with you all and your sales team with sort of general ideas about the system that they want, right? Or they will have an excessive list of 1,000 requirements, which becomes an unmanageable amount of information. My orientation in all of this has always been from a sort of a process perspective. What does the organization need to do? Generally speaking, how do they need to be able to do it? What are the requirements that fit into that orientation, that process orientation? We have to process X number of gifts that come in daily, right? And the answer for you all would be different if it was 20 gifts versus 10,000 gifts. So orienting to the work that we do in nonprofit organizations is, in my view, a better way of doing it than sort of that long list of requirements or sort of general, like I need to fundraise. Like you guys know how to fundraise. I just need to fundraise. Yeah. Similar to what I said earlier, I think often those decisions can get made in a silo where there isn't broader representation from stakeholders across the organization that have an impact in this. Some of them might be a small stake, some of them
Yeah.
are a huge stake. And then I think the other one I would say is that organizations sometimes have a failure to do a little bit of a deeper due diligence. So obviously, I'm sure you guys provide references to anyone that is seeking, and that's of course incredibly helpful. I have often had organizations get on the phone with the person who manages the system, say, and that person might give them sort of a demo of how it works, because it's always a very different experience from you have wonderful sales engineers and wonderful people that do demos. When you see someone that's more on your level using it, you get a better sense of like, what are the ins and outs and like, where might the challenges be? Where is this working incredibly well? I think that's what I would say are sort of the top three.
A lot of organizations assume they need a brand new system when a challenge arrives, right? How are we going to fix this thing? Yeah. And in some cases, it may be more about the processes or adoption of what they already have or how the technology is actually being used. So can you share what would be your framework for someone who is on the verge of making a replace a system versus keep what they've got and trying to optimize that in some fashion?
Yeah. Generally speaking, I would say my framework is to look a little more holistically about what the implications are for a change, particularly in a system that does fundraising, donor management, where there's a lot involved there, right? Ural's products do a lot of different things. And it isn't just a question of, well, my people don't like it, so I'm going to give them this new system. So my first question is always through interviews and other things is how well does the current system support their current activities and their current operations?
Yeah.
Functionality, technical requirements, integration requirements. The next question is how much of what it isn't doing at the moment, to your point, is due to lack of training or poor data management, or just it hasn't been adopted for various cultural or political reasons. Because the answer to that question means maybe you still need a new system, but we still have to address the issues of adoption and why people aren't using the system the way it should be used. So if it looks like a new system probably would serve folks, what are the systems that are out there that provably could do these things better?
Yeah.
And then look at a cost benefit analysis in terms of how much is it going to cost to implement a new system?
Yep.
What's the comparison between sort of the annual cost, the subscription cost, the service cost that would come on an annual basis? But also there's a cost, and it's sometimes a huge one, to an organization that has to go through a big technology change. Yeah. They talk about the things that are disruptive in people's lives, like changing houses or a death in the family or getting married or all those kinds of things. For organizations, the equivalent is often a system change. Yeah. For a large system, a robust and complex system like you guys have, the cost to the organization in terms of how disruptive it can actually be to change systems is enormous. And that's putting aside the technical challenges, the conversion, the training that has to happen, the people that have to spend time in meetings. I try to encourage people not to take that lightly, because even if it makes sense to change, we need to plan for that disruption. Yeah. And to recognize if you're doing a big system change, you might have to take people that are doing a job today and backfill them for the period of time that they're going to be there, as an example.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think you bring up a lot of great points, Peter. And, and it's funny because, when in the turnover in this industry, also, it's at the end of the day, what I see when new people come in and not know what's there, it is training. It could be as simple as that, right? I mean, And you're absolutely right. And then on the other side, where they really do need a new system because maybe a vendor is outrageously expensive today and it's not fitting their budget. And frankly, they're not getting the support that they would think that they were getting. They've got to find and select a company that, um, really can understand what that data migration process is and make it simpler for them and not make it so difficult. And I know that's one of the things that Ariba really strives for, that we try and relieve people on the data migration process, because we don't move data just for sake of moving data. But you bring up a lot of good points, and you emphasize that data is one of the most valuable resources a nonprofit have, which I couldn't agree with you more. Why do so many organizations still struggle to manage it well? And what does a truly data-driven nonprofit look like in practice from your perspective?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the struggle is real. Um, Part of it is that there's just so much data, right? Even an organization that's had the same system for a long time is looking to change. The data that exists, such a huge job to organize and understand even just the data you have. And it's hard, it's in the context of they already have all of this data. It's very hard to think about what new data they might want in that environment, because it very much feels like uh, a weight on people. Like, we want to be able to measure these things. We've never done it, or when we've done it, it hasn't worked very well. I think a lot of it is that the quality of the data is often either low or unknown. Um, I'm amazed at the number of organizations who don't really have a clear idea of where their mission critical data sits. And it can sit, I've worked with huge organizations where the list of places where data was stored was mind boggling. We're talking dozens and dozens of
Yeah,
places,
yeah,
about half of which would have been known at that time.
yeah.
Because the data also, part of the struggle is that data can tend to live in silos.
Right.
Sometimes those silos are intentional. People can get territorial about data. It's not a criticism. I get it. Sometimes it's just by accident, or by necessity, like someone just needed a system to do this. And so now that's another system that has data in it that's important.
And if data has to migrate from one silo to the other silo, now you've got a workload issue there that's a cost as well. So
Yes, absolutely.
technology plays a bigger role in fundraising and donor relationships than ever before. Obviously, everybody's using technology in their fundraising, but many organizations still struggle with, as you just mentioned, disconnected systems, manual processes, and tools that can be very frustrating. Eh, can you share your insights into how the right technology can help increase fundraising and donor engagement for an organization?
Yeah. I think you just alluded to it. Certainly emphasizing those systems that have the opportunity to bring more data together in a more integrated way is incredibly important.
Yeah, yeah,
Ultimately, for me, the right fundraising and donor engagement technology, with you guys at Ariva, I think being a really good example, provide a platform where human beings who have to use and manage the system have the tools they need to actually do the work. As I talked about earlier, there's plenty of ways in which those systems might not get used, and those are important things to work on. But the baseline of having usable tools that are relatively low friction for end users to operate and to use, that it's flexible to make changes as needed for the organization, whether that's at the data level, at the presentation level, at the report level, whatever those are, that it has that kind of flexibility. But another reason I think you all have really gotten so much of this right, is that flexibility is a double-edged sword.
Mm.
We all know there are platforms out there that will tell you they can do anything, and it's not untrue. But it's really important that the system have a point of view that's rooted in best practices,
Hmm.
which not every single one of them is necessarily going to fit every single organization, but has enough flexibility that they can make adjustments for the way that they want to work. The last thing I'd say is that the right technology for fundraising and donor engagement should be able to help enforce or encourage, depending on which kind of incentive system you like, the behaviors and standards that the organization wishes to incentivize. Timely entry, regular data quality checks, prompts for actions to take, etc. It's just, as I've talked about, adoption is just a huge challenge for every organization. And all of those things reduce the barrier to people actually adopting the system.
Peter, you really do speak our volume. I mean, when you think about the 3 to 5 year outlook, I always tell people, Ariva is truly an all-in-one, and they don't have to buy everything. I mean, not that we solved all the problems that you said. Even on the data problem, there's so many people that are in a, I don't know if you know this, but in a records base, and we do it in a household base. So
Right.
if they have individual, it really helps them. We also do this whole data migration cleansing, and all the applications. I mean, it's really over many, many, many years, but clients would say, hey, I understand your value proposition. It's all in one. Anybody registered for an event or donation or grants or anything, it goes into a donor database. But what about auctions? You don't have auctions. Software. Well, we have auction software. Well, what about team fundraising? We have that. But even like you said, when they're starting out, they may not need everything today. But the thing that you don't want people to do is start buying siloed applications to fill their needs in the future. And I think that's one of the things that Ariva does provide in looking out, because you can start with a couple of applications. You never have to buy it all, which is really nice. We also, knowing that, we've priced this and we've built this around grassroots organizations to the largest ones in the world, literally. And then we have some really awesome little ones that they're in autism, and it's an all volunteer organization. It spans. So when I asked that question, you answered it really great, and I appreciate it. I mean, there's a lot more to it, but we really did solve a lot of the problems in the technology side. We didn't solve all of them with technology, but we certainly solved a lot of them. We've talked a lot about how a lot of these organizations invest heavily in the new technology and buying new software, and they have the expectations that it will unfortunately immediately solve operational challenges, right?
Yeah.
But implementation and adoption, like you said, can often become their biggest hurdles. And you've worked, which is really fantastic with your experience, on a lot of implementations, and really it also applies to change management. But why do so many of these tech projects fail or stall, and what does successful adoption actually require beyond just training?
Yeah. I mean, training is obviously an incredibly important part, but, and what I find is helpful for organizations is that training be put into context of the way the organization works. I think for a long time in the industry, training was sort of out of the box, right? Like, here's your gift entry training. Here is your prospect management training. Here is your, that we're sort of standard. That's how this works. It's really important for organizations to not only do that piece of it, but when they've decided this is how I'm going to use that system, that be documented. And that's the sort of process orientation that I was talking about earlier. It's important for them going into the implementation as well as coming out of the implementation that they know what they need to do, how they need to do it, and how they're going to measure it.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that can often challenge organizations is that sort of natural human desire to hang on to the way that things have been done before, which nobody likes change, right? Like that's relatively speaking, nobody likes change. Um, but the organization has to come together to make decisions, not just based on how it's been done. What are the new capabilities of the system? How has our business changed in a way that that old way of doing business isn't going to work for us anymore? And you mentioned change management, and it's a buzzword that, I mean, it's not a buzzword, but it sometimes gets treated as a buzzword that can appear to be like unbelievably complicated.
Yeah.
My definition of change management is that leadership and staff are prepared for the change that is coming. Notice that the word happy was not in that sentence because the goal of a change can't ever be to make everybody happy.
Right.
It's just, if it does, I mean, you should seriously have a party. But there are going to be people in various degrees of happiness about the change. But what they need to be is prepared for that change. That means things like being involved in design and decision making about the system at the appropriate levels, having clear communications about what's changing and when, clear expectations for how that change is going to be supported. Day one of a new system is always a little frantic because everyone is getting used to using these new systems. And so putting in place extra support, extra office hours, extra, resources that are available to walk people through the things that they now have to do. But the watchword for me is preparation.
Got it.
And happy is a bonus.
So let's talk about change just a little bit. The role of technology within nonprofits obviously has evolved dramatically over the last several years. You mentioned March of 2020, and it's at 6 years ago. Lots changed in the last 6 years, and from a data strategy to donor management and AI driven tool discussion, the expectations and opportunities continue to grow. So what skills do nonprofit technologists need today that they perhaps didn't need 5 or 10 years ago? And what trends in nonprofit technology excite you?
Yeah, the obviously AI is an incredibly exciting, somewhat destabilizing, overwhelming kind of a technology, right? That has everything has been promised that it can do. I think some of the most exciting work that I've seen that my clients are doing is developing their own AI models to support their clients, their customers. So, as an example, I worked with an education organization and they were developing their own, I guess, LLM or AI program that would assist teachers in the classroom. And it would be based on, I'm going to say thousands, it's probably tens of thousands of pages of educational research and outcomes and all of those different things. They're providing an incredibly exciting tool set to teachers and administrators in K through 12. That's incredibly exciting. The question, what do technologists, nonprofit technologists need today that they didn't need 5 to 10 years ago? I mean, obviously, these new technologies in some ways are stretching the boundaries of technologies. But my answer is a little bit I don't know if it's counterintuitive. I actually think what's been happening in the 30, 35 years that I've been in the nonprofit technology business, as all those things I was talking about, like networking and servers and all of those pieces and security are becoming commoditized. The need for the nonprofit technologist more than ever is really around stuff that is not as technical as it might have been in the past. For me, the most effective nonprofit technologists are able to communicate effectively with the non-tech staff, the program staff, the fundraising staff, accounting, et cetera, understanding their requirements, their needs, understanding change management, being really clear and up to date on how their business operates and needs to operate. Being a good communicator, developing clear plans, documenting decisions, and also feeling agency to push back respectfully, in particular on timing and priority for requests. And it's one of the reasons that I think it's so important that when they can, organizations have a technology leadership position that sits on the executive committee level. But the nonprofit technologists, it's more important than ever that they are business people, nonprofit business people with excellent soft skills, because that's ultimately what's going to lead to success with all of these systems, is not only the tech side, understanding how the system works, understanding how the technology works, but understanding what it takes to translate each organization's business needs into the really effective use of that technology.
Wow.
Well, Peter, you gave a lot of information, and I mean, it really is really you're extremely knowledgeable. But if you could give every nonprofit leader just one piece of advice about technology, and this is a hard one, for the next 3 to 5 years, what would it be? And what is one tool or system every nonprofit should invest in?
So I'm going to say naturally the obvious answer is Ariva, right? Like I just have to say that right off the top. More broadly,
we don't have to say it, but we appreciate it.
It's interesting. My experience with nonprofits has been from everything from a 5-person organization to something like the American Red Cross and the Nature Conservancy, right? And so that's a recommendation about a particular system. But what I would say from a technology perspective, and I think this goes along with the way we talked about changing the way nonprofit technologists work, it's important to start to shift from treating technology as purely a cost center to become more of a capacity multiplier. And I talked about this a little earlier about that systems are able to make people's jobs easier.
Yeah.
The example I use all the time, which is super simple, but I've had this discussion with a number of nonprofits over the years. You know, particularly since 2020, so much of the work that people are doing is from home, part-time or full-time. I can't tell you the number of times I've been on calls with the folks that are at home and their broadband is just not effective.
Yeah.
And my recommendation has always been, you will see that money come back if you pay for their broadband at a reasonable speed that allows them to do the business that they want to do.
Yeah.
I think similarly about licensing, the number of organizations where the licenses are just at the absolute minimum of what they need to be.
Yeah.
And it causes all sorts of disruptions with folks because they have to, like, this person has to get off, or I have to inactivate this user and get that user. Technology is a program driver, it is a fundraising driver, and it is a back office system that enables all sorts of things. But it is, at this point, different than I think when we all started in this business. It is an asset in and of itself that is not just a utility. It is a multiplier when invested in properly.
Yeah.
We like to give our audience one takeaway from the show that they can begin to do this week. What would be one action you'd recommend for every organization that's listening to do this week?
So I've been thinking about that question a little bit, and the one I came up with was because it had to be something that someone could do, sort of start quickly, right?
Yeah.
What I came up with is engaging in a data treasure hunt. The organizations that I've worked with frequently, like I said earlier, don't have really a strong idea of where their data actually is, and sometimes in what condition it's in. So finding the places where important data lives and document what you can about it. What kind of data? How much of it? What condition is it in? How valuable is it, or how valuable might it be? And they have to look in multiple places, formal systems,
Yeah.
like Exceed Further, whatever accounting system they're using, if they have got programmatic systems that are separate, et cetera. Then there's what I like to call sort of rogue databases. They're either legacy systems that someone just sort of acquired on the sly, or, and this is true, I find a lot for folks who are major gift fundraisers, the data is sitting in Excel or Google spreadsheets.
Yeah.
And then the hardest to get a handle on is the personal locations that people keep data. Like the only record of a donor communication is in a gift officer's email
Yeah.
or in their notebook, which is
Right.
notoriously difficult to convert into a new system, right?
Yeah.
And I never called it a treasure hunt, but I kind of like that because it is treasure in many ways. Um, the results can be surprising when
Yeah.
people see just how many places mission critical data is actually
Yeah.
sitting. It can be
You didn't actually
surprising, it can be enlightening, and it can be modestly terrifying.
you didn't actually mention it, but I don't think I might have missed it. But also who's using the data and why?
Yes,
You
absolutely.
may, you may be storing a lot of data that's completely irrelevant to the current operation of the business.
Absolutely. Oh, I didn't even think about like organizational paper files,
Yeah.
which becoming less and less of an issue, but
Right.
still, people have a lot of paper out there.
Peter, we've spoken about your work, but I'm curious to know what is something about you that might surprise our audience to find out.
So, in addition to this work that I've done for 36 years, my other job, if you will, is I'm an ADHD coach. I was diagnosed with ADHD 10 years ago when I was 48. Um, and that period of time when COVID shut everything down actually became an opportunity for me to get certified in coaching, to learn more about ADHD. And so my other passion is supporting men in midlife who have had a late diagnosis with ADHD. And so that's another important part of my life.
Hey, congratulations on that. That is
Thank you.
very powerful. And I think we'd all be surprised how many people actually have it and not sure why they do certain things. And I think that's a wonderful because it doesn't matter the age or when it is. If you can help anybody at any age, it's just fantastic. So thank you for sharing something confidentially like that, which shouldn't be confidential. You should be proud of it, and I'm glad you shared that with us. And
Absolutely.
and in saying that, we always like to finish our show by asking, and we're actually not finishing it. We have a few more, but asking this in this area, what is something that we didn't ask you that you wish we had?
The services that I provide, I've described a lot of them, particularly at the organization level: system selections, system evaluations, support for implementations, change management, all of that good stuff. Um, but the other thing that I feel really strongly about is being able to coach the nonprofit technologists. I mean, they might have ADHD, but that's not usually the focus of the coaching. But um, I have always been struck about often how alone those folks feel. They feel like they're sort of on a technology island, and they're not quite sure how to properly connect with the other parts of the organization. As I said, that sort of the soft skills piece of this. And so that's been one of my favorite things about working with nonprofit organizations is the people that are in those positions, whether it's an IT person, sort of strictly speaking, or a database manager, or a director of, development operations, or something like that. I just think those folks are so absolutely critical and in many cases an underused resource.
Well, Peter, thank you. This was great. And we'll be right back after this pause.
We are a team that has had an enduring influence on the nonprofit industry for more than 3 decades. We pride ourselves on developing and delivering technology with a purpose, software born of a genuine understanding and passion for cause. We are relentlessly dedicated to our client success. We are with our clients for good. We are Ariva, tech with purpose, driven by cause. Ariva is the trusted advisor and market leader of fundraising, donor relationship management, and auction software and services. Exceed further, our evolutionary all-in-one digital fundraising and donor relationship management software is helping nonprofits worldwide further their mission, transform fundraising, and cultivate relationships with donors and constituents. Our Maestro auction virtual, live, and silent auction software, text-to-bid, virtual and mobile bidding software, and text-to-fund, text-based donation software are helping nonprofits raise billions of dollars through thousands of virtual fundraising events, charity auctions, and galas. Visit Ariva.com and reach out today and see how Ariva can help your nonprofit organization go further.
Welcome back, everybody. Okay, Peter, it is time for something we call the Ask the Maestro. And this question comes from Patricia, and we're going to let you be the maestro today. We're going to let you offer your answer to this. She said, our organization has been using the same donor database for over 10 years. And while it's technically still works, our team spends a huge amount of time manually pulling reports, exporting spreadsheets, trying to connect donor information across different systems, and so on and so forth. Leadership is hesitant to make a change because of the fear of disruption and cost. So at what point do you know the inefficiency is actually costing you more than staying with the system? And you're our maestro today, so have at it, Peter.
So obviously it's difficult to come up with a hard and fast rule about when it makes sense to change. But I think that cost benefit comparison can be a really effective tool when you're comparing something new with what you have currently. So, as I said, the list of work that the organization does, I would imagine that they could rate from some perspective how well they think in each of those areas that system supports them. In addition, they could probably do some investigation, and maybe they've already done it. It's possible. Like, why do those reports take so much time to run? Why do they have to be done manually, et cetera? And again, that cost comparison plus the cost comparison of the two plus the disruption factor, which Patricia mentioned.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the tricky things of the work is that there's no hard and fast rule. Part of it depends on the financial situation of the nonprofit itself,
Right,
as well as their staffing and to what extent they would benefit from not doing all those manual things, as well as the extent to which they would be disrupted during the implementation and shortly thereafter for adopting a new system. It's funny, you said 10 years. I'm trying to remember what 10 years ago looked like in the fundraising market at this point. I mean, it changed a ton from the time I started doing this kind of work in 2000 to 2010, right? And it's only accelerating to just an enormous degree.
Yeah, it is. Everything changed very quickly. Well, that's a great answer. And for all of you listening, make sure you submit your questions for our next segment of Ask the Maestro. You might hear your question being answered by either David or I, or perhaps one of our guests.
Well, Peter, it was a pleasure having you with us today. It was such a treat. It really was. I mean, we never normally get somebody of your caliber and your experience and knowledge of technology. So thank you. And we really appreciate and hopefully all of our listeners really got some great advice on this as well. So thank you very much for that. And again, I do want to thank all of our listeners for joining us today. Make sure you subscribe to Driven by Cause while you're at it. Don't leave a 4-star, but leave a 5-star rating. I also want to give a thank you to our amazing sponsor, Arriva. Thank you to all of our fantastic listeners. We hope you'll join us next time on Driven by Cause and make it a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.